Welcome back to the Stay at Home Garden Lessons, and happy Earth Day. So today I'm going to talk about companion planting. I've brought it up a lot in many of my other videos, especially when I'm in my garden and pointing out the different plants that I have next to each other. So it's a practice that I personally like to follow when planting. Companion planting is simply using different plants, different varieties and species, and mixing them so they can help each other out. So certain plants can help other plants, whether it's bugs, repelling them, or helping with watering systems, and I'll go through that. I follow this kind of as a rule of thumb when I like to plant my gardens. Not only does it give me a variety in the vegetables and herbs that I get to produce, eat, and consume and cook with, but it also makes my garden a lot healthier. It creates biodiversity and a healthier place for my plants to grow, increases nutrition and their ability to grow, maybe how much they grow, how fast they grow, and if they're just happier and they look prettier. So those are just some kind of easy reasons as to why I'm talking about companion planting. So companion plants, they complement each other or multiple plants. For example, some plants, especially herbs, naturally repel insects. Ones that really might like snacking on my leafy greens, there's some flowers and herbs out there that repel those bugs. Another part of companion planting is looking at the nutrients in the soil. So some plants will take out different nutrients while others put back in or need less of. So it's important to think about when you're planting plants next to each other, how they might interact. And some of them are friends and some of them are foes. So generally we're talking about natural support, where plants and flowers that grow tall and strong can be a support system for like peas and any kind of crawling vegetables, cucumbers, and things like that. So you can use those as physical structures. And that's really a neat way to have a garden. It's visually very interesting. Another one is plant health. So one plant might need more specific nutrients from the soil, while another plant either replenishes the soil with it, adds it back in, or doesn't use as much. So you plant those next to each other so it balances out the extraction of different nutrients in the soil or the putting in of certain nutrients. And that also helps with the biochemistry of the soil. So just in general, certain plants bring and take different things into your environment. So making sure you have plants that interact with each other positively, where one needs one thing and one gives that off, and vice versa. That is definitely a way you can use companion planting in your garden. Also, optimizing space. So you might have something like squash that spreads all along the ground, but before it actually starts spreading out and you have all this bare area where the sun is baking the soil, and it's hurting the microorganisms in the soil and it's creating weeds, you can plant things like lettuce and spinach that are leafy and green and that can grow, and they're quicker growers than squash, and they cover the ground, so it creates shade and increases biodiversity in the area and keeps microorganisms in the soil. And then you can produce and harvest and eat the lettuce all the while the squash is growing and spreading out. And then by the time the squash has covered the ground, then you have an area for the squash and it doesn't injure the lettuce at all. But you want to make sure when you do something like that, you think about the root system. So thinking about putting root systems next to each other and how they might interact under the soil and not just on top of the soil. And then weed prevention. So like I said, optimizing space for the example I gave with the squash, using lettuce as a ground covering, that definitely helps as well. And then also to regulate wind and shade. So some plants like to be shaded, while others like full sun. And you can use different plants that grow quite big and tall, searching for the sun, that shade the bottom area, and then plant in that lower area plants that like shady area. So in the summertime, you might not be able to grow lettuce because it's too hot and it doesn't rain enough and they become bitter and you don't want to eat that. But you could try growing it in the shade of another plant, and you don't have to buy shade cloth or anything like that. So that's definitely another way that you can use plants as companion plants. So just a few plants that are well known for their companion planting. Dill and basil are natural protectors for tomato plants. They keep away hornworms, and there is a lot said that basil helps the flavor. Marigolds is another really common thing, one I also use. I use basil as well. I've got tons of little basil plants growing, but that's also because I love cooking with it. So I like using that companion plant because it's useful for me and useful for all my green veggies. But like I said, marigolds are another one. They're a beautiful flower, but they also repel specific pests, again, for helping for tomatoes. And then mint. Mint is another repellent, especially for ants and cabbage moths. I've got a ton of mint growing. Again, that's something I love to eat. So I have mint growing as one of my companion plants. Nasturtiums. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of nasturtiums. They're a very beautiful, cool flower, and they're edible, but they help prevent insects, specifically aphids, which love to eat kale, broccoli, and things like that, and are usually a pest in my garden. So I love planting nasturtiums to help me out. Sage, again, is another herb that will help out with cabbage moths. And zinnias are actually excellent companion plants, and because they attract ladybugs. So it's not only about repelling, but what it can bring into the garden. And ladybugs are really well known to help keep out pests, again. So those are some different ways that you can use plants as friends, as their companions that help each other out. And keep in mind that watering is also part of the system. So you want to think about when you plant a plant, how much water it's going to need. Does it have really deep roots that goes deep into the ground, and you're going to have to water that quite a bit more than a root that has fibrous roots and it spreads out and you only have to water the surface. So make sure when you plant plants, you also think about their watering systems and how much water you might need, versus not needing any water. Or if it's a tomato and you don't want to use a sprinkler system and overhead watering where it'll split the tomato and create disease on the tomatoes themselves, and you need more drip lines. And that might not be as important if you are not growing something like a tomato. There are companion plants, but they're also incompatible plants that do not like being planted next to each other. For example, white garlic and onion, they may repel pests, and I love planting with them. They're definitely one of the companion plants that I use regularly in my garden, but they are known to not do well, or they're known to injure bean and pea plants. They stunt their growth. So keep in mind to look up the different plants that you're planting and what they might like to be planted next to. How might that help each other out? And it's a fun little mix and match kind of game, a puzzle piece, if you will, of your garden, and it will look beautiful. There'll be variety, and check it out. Send me some photos, especially through the process of what you're doing. And if your garden in the summer ends up looking like a beautiful chaos of biodiversity that's growing really vivaciously, send us a picture and show us how companion planting can be done. So have a great day, everyone, and happy Earth Day. I hope you guys get outside, eat some fresh vegetables, plant something, get to go look at trees, or just simply have some sun on your face. Have a great day.